The camera lights burned hot as Alex Jones leaned forward, his gravelly voice filling the studio with the same fiery energy that had made him infamous. He was in his comfort zone, shouting into the microphone, waving stacks of papers, rattling off theories that his loyal audience believed without question. His style was larger than life, chaotic yet calculated, designed to overwhelm anyone who dared to challenge him. For years, very few people had the nerve to do so in real time. That changed the moment Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett appeared on the live broadcast. The split screen flashed her image, calm and composed, in stark contrast to Jones' restless pacing. He barely paused to greet her before plunging into one of his favorite talking points, a claim he had repeated countless times on his show. He spoke with absolute certainty, insisting that secret networks and unnamed insiders had confirmed his narrative. His voice rose as he hammered each point, leaning closer to the camera as though sheer volume could substitute for substance. Crockett let him speak without interruption. Her stillness carried a quiet power, the kind that unsettles someone who thrives on chaos. When he finally paused for breath, she seized the opening with a simple question. Her tone was steady, almost casual, but the words cut sharper than any insult. She asked him to show the evidence, not vague references, not anonymous whispers. She wanted the proof that supported the claims he was declaring as fact. For a moment, the air in the studio shifted. Jones blinked, caught off guard by the directness of her demand. He shuffled the papers on his desk, lifting them up as if they contained the answers. His audience had seen this routine before. The props, the gestures, the promises that the evidence was all right there. But Crockett didn't let the theatrics pass unchallenged. She repeated her question, this time more pointed, pressing him to present a single piece of verifiable documentation. Jones' face tightened, his voice grew louder. He spoke of unnamed insiders, government leaks, and underground sources that supposedly confirmed everything he had been saying. He gestured wildly, his hands moving as fast as his words. But the more he raised his volume, the calmer she became. She leaned slightly forward, her eyes locked on the camera, and asked again, "Where is the proof?" The tension was unmistakable. His audience expected him to dominate every conversation, to steamroll anyone who dared to push back. But Crockett's approach was different. She didn't match his aggression with her own. Instead, she dismantled his performance by refusing to be distracted. Every time he dodged, she brought the question back to the center. Every time he accused her of being part of a hidden agenda, she redirected him to the facts. The back and forth exposed a dynamic that viewers weren't used to seeing. For once, Alex Jones wasn't in control. His energy, usually a weapon, now looked like desperation. He had built his career on presenting himself as the man with hidden knowledge, the one who knew what they didn't want you to hear. But with Crockett calmly asking for receipts, his authority wavered. His voice cracked under the weight of her persistence, and the papers in his hand no longer looked like proof, they looked like props. Viewers at home could see the moment his confidence faltered. He tried to shout her down, tried to pivot to another topic, even tried to discredit her by accusing her of being part of some grand scheme. Yet Crockett's expression never changed. She sat there, composed, waiting for him to either produce evidence or admit he didn't have any. The silence between her words seemed to unnerve him more than any insult ever could. As the segment went on, it became clear that this wasn't just another debate. It was a rare confrontation where bluster met calm persistence. Crockett didn't need to raise her voice or trade insults. She simply held her ground, forcing him to face the one thing he couldn't talk his way around: the truth. By the time the commercial break approached, Jones was visibly agitated. He had avoided answering her question directly, circling around it with noise and accusations, but the audience had already seen the cracks. For the first time in years, Alex Jones was not the unstoppable force on his own show. He had been put on the defensive, and it all started with a single, steady question from Jasmine Crockett. "Where's the evidence?" Would you like me to move on and expand Keynote 2 in the same 700-word storytelling style, keeping the same tone? Alex Jones was not a man used to being cornered, especially not in his own studio. The walls of the room seemed to echo with his booming voice as he launched into another tirade, determined to drown out the uncomfortable reality that Jasmine Crockett had forced him to confront. She had asked a question that required precision, something verifiable and specific, but instead of answering, he reached for the oldest tool in his arsenal: noise. The moment the question of proof hung in the air, Jones began shuffling through papers as if one of them contained the smoking gun. The problem was, none of them did. His hands moved quickly, tossing sheets aside, flashing graphs and scribbled notes toward the camera, but nothing actually answered what she asked. To cover the absence, he leaned on volume. His voice rose, the growl deepening into near yelling, as though force could erase the doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, they don't want you to know the truth, he barked, pointing to the lens. They don't want you to see what's right in front of your face. It was the same rhythm his listeners knew well: the repetition, the certainty, the fire. But Crockett didn't flinch. She sat there, still and patient, as if she had heard the performance before. When he paused to catch his breath, she cut in again, calm but sharp, reminding him that the question wasn't about what they wanted, it was about what he could prove. Asterisk, the contrast was startling. Jones' voice ricocheted off the studio walls while hers carried like a steady undertone, the kind that draws attention precisely because it doesn't compete. He tried to talk over her, interrupting, repeating himself. But she pressed on. Each time she brought him back to the point. The cracks in his confidence widened. Asterisk. He fumbled with phrases like hidden sources and classified leaks, insisting that the documents existed but were too dangerous to show. At one point, he even waved a crumpled sheet in the air, claiming it was confirmation from an insider. But as the camera zoomed in, viewers saw nothing but vague bullet points and scribbles. Crockett, unbothered, asked once more if he had a single verifiable source to put forward. Asterisk. The tension in his face became impossible to ignore. Sweat beaded at his temples as he tried to laugh it off, accusing her of being a puppet for the establishment. The insult fell flat. Crockett didn't take the bait. She simply leaned in closer to her microphone and told him that her question wasn't going away. No matter how many insults he hurled, the silence that followed was louder than his shouting. Asterisk. For years, Jones had mastered the art of controlling the tempo. He dominated conversations by overwhelming them, making his guests look weak or confused under the weight of his energy. But Crockett wasn't confused. She was deliberate, cutting through the smoke with pointed reminders that his arguments required more than emotion. The more he dodged, the more transparent the avoidance became. His defensiveness betrayed the absence of proof. Asterisk. Viewers could feel the unease building. On social media, clips began to circulate within minutes, showing Jones' booming voice breaking into stammers while Crockett's steady tone cut through. His followers, used to watching him dismantle opponents, were now watching him unravel. The spectacle of him slamming papers on his desk or pounding his fist carried no weight against her quiet insistence on facts. Asterisk. Jones' voice eventually cracked. He leaned back in his chair, his face red, veins pulsing in his neck, and shouted about conspiracies so broad they couldn't be pinned down. He blamed shadow governance, hidden elites, and an organized cover-up, but all of it sounded more frantic than convincing. Crockett's.com refusal to let him escape the question was doing what no insult could, exposing the hollowness beneath the noise. Asterisk. The longer the exchange went on, the more apparent it became that his defensiveness wasn't strength, it was fear of exposure. The man who built his empire on commanding presence now looked cornered in his own arena. Every deflection, every raised voice, every pounding fist made the absence of evidence stand out more clearly. Asterisk. By the time the segment edged toward its close, Crockett had said fewer words than Jones, but her impact was undeniable. She had shown that beneath the showmanship, the booming voice, and the endless stack of papers, there was a fragile core that couldn't stand up to a simple demand for truth. Alex Jones had turned to volume 2 to shield himself, but in doing so, he only highlighted the weakness he wanted to hide. Asterisk. Asterisk. Do you want me to continue with Keynote 3 in the same expanded storytelling style next? Jasmine. Crockett had listened long enough to Alex Jones' evasions. The louder he shouted, the clearer it became that there was nothing solid behind his words. She waited for him to pause, not rushing, not raising her own voice. And when the moment opened, she leaned forward and began laying out her own evidence. Unlike the scattered papers on his desk, hers were organized, sourced, and undeniable. She held them up to the camera one by one, citing official reports, public records, and documents that viewers could verify for themselves. Asterisk. Alex Jones tried to cut her off, interjecting with his booming voice, but the rhythm of her delivery left no space for him to dominate. Each point she made contradicted a claim he had just shouted. Where he spoke of shadowy insiders, she cited the Freedom of Information Act. Where he waved vague notes, she referred to court transcripts and government filings. Her calm tone carried an authority that his theatrics could not erase. Asterisk. The studio dynamic shifted. Normally, his bluster created the illusion of control, but now the control belonged to the person who didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't engage with his insults or his distractions. Instead, she anchored the conversation to facts, forcing him into a space where he was weakest. For viewers at home, it was striking to see the contrast between the two screens. Jones, red-faced and restless, and Crockett, steady and unbothered as she dismantled his narrative piece by piece. Asterisk. As she spoke, she made it clear that the truth wasn't hidden behind closed doors. It wasn't locked away in secret files, only accessible to so-called insiders. It was public, available to anyone willing to look past sensational headlines. The more she explained, the more his credibility unraveled. The myths he had built, repeated for years, now looked flimsy next to the plain reality she laid out. Asterisk. Jones slammed his desk again, his voice cracking as he accused her of twisting information. But she didn't waver. She leaned back slightly, letting the audience absorb the documents on screen, and then simply asked if he had anything concrete to counter them. The silence that followed was more telling than any argument. He filled it quickly with shouting, but everyone watching could see that shouting wasn't an answer. Asterisk. Her method was deliberate. By refusing to match his chaos, she exposed it. The louder he grew, the calmer she became, and in that calm, she left space for viewers to compare the two approaches. Jones was offering noise. Crockett was offering proof. She wasn't just challenging his statements, she was exposing the structure of his entire performance, showing that volume had always stood in for evidence. The reaction online was immediate. Clips began to circulate where she read directly from documents while Jones fumbled to interrupt. Viewers noted how she didn't need dramatic gestures or fiery rhetoric. The facts alone carried more weight than his thunderous claims. His empire had been built on the idea that no one could challenge him effectively in real time. Yet here she was, live on his own platform, tearing apart his arguments without breaking a sweat. For Alex Jones, the moment was more than just embarrassing. It was his authority depended on the belief that he was the one uncovering hidden truths, the one revealing what others wouldn't dare say. But Crockett showed that the truth was not hidden at all. It was simply different from what he had been selling. His insistence that he was the lone voice against the establishment now looked hollow in the face of verifiable records that any member of the public could access. He tried to rally, declaring that the documents she cited were fabricated or manipulated, but the claim landed weakly. Crockett simply reminded him that these were government records and legal filings, available to anyone. Her composure underlined the weakness of his outburst. Viewers could see that he wasn't dismantling her case. He was reacting to it. The unraveling was visible in his body language. He shifted in his chair, his hands shaking slightly as he waved his papers. His once commanding presence now looked frantic. Crockett, meanwhile, remained unshaken. Her strategy had worked. By introducing facts into a space built on noise, she made the noise collapse under its own weight. By the time she finished, there was no mistaking the outcome. She had taken his strongest weapon performance and rendered it ineffective. Alex Jones had always been the man with the answers, the one who claimed to know what no one else did. But in that moment, live and unedited, he was revealed as a man without proof, grasping for authority he could no longer hold. Do you want me to also expand? Keynote 4 into 700 words in the same storytelling style. By the time the broadcast reached its final stretch, the difference between Alex Jones and Jasmine Crockett had become impossible to ignore. He had spent the segment shifting between shouting, accusing, and deflecting, while she had relied on patience and evidence. The screen told the story better than words ever could. One side frantic, red-faced and restless, the other calm, steady, and unmoved. The contrast left viewers questioning whether Jones was unraveling under the very spotlight he had always commanded. As the moderator attempted to steer the discussion toward a close, Jones leaned into his microphone with renewed force. His voice thundered as he accused Crockett of being part of an orchestrated effort to silence him. He pounded his desk and jabbed his finger toward the camera, painting himself as the lone truth-teller under attack. For years, this posture had rallied his base. But on this night, it came across differently. The desperation in his tone overshadowed the confidence he tried to project. Crockett didn't interrupt. She didn't laugh, scoff, or even roll her eyes. She let him finish every word, and when he finally paused, breathing heavily, she leaned slightly forward and spoke softly enough that viewers had to listen closely. Her tone was steady as she reminded him and the audience that shouting doesn't make something true. She repeated that facts speak louder than volume, then gestured toward the documents she had presented earlier. Her composure was striking. Sitting across from one of the most aggressive personalities in broadcasting, she never once matched his fire with fire. Instead, she let the contrast play out for the audience to judge. The louder he became, the calmer she appeared. The more unhinged he looked, the more collected she seemed. In that balance, viewers saw the difference between spectacle and substance. Jones tried to push back again, but the words tangled. His usual rhythm, sharp and commanding, stumbled into rambling accusations. He spoke of shadowy figures and coordinated attacks, but it sounded like filler, not revelation. His face was flushed, sweat visible under the studio lights, his energy spiraling rather than focused. The man who once prided himself on being in control of every exchange was losing his grip on live television. Meanwhile, Crockett leaned back in her chair, a faint smile crossing her face as though she had expected this outcome from the beginning. She didn't need to raise her voice to prove her point. Her silence alone highlighted how far Jones had strayed from answering a simple question. Viewers at home began to notice the imbalance. Social media lit up with clips of the split screen, the visual of a man unraveling beside a woman calmly holding her ground. It wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a clash of methods. Jones relied on sheer force, assuming that intensity equaled credibility. Crockett relied on poise, showing that truth didn't require theatrics to stand strong. The live broadcast captured that clash in real time, and for once, his tactics weren't working. Instead of controlling the narrative, he had become the narrative, the subject of ridicule and disbelief. As the segment closed, Jones made one last attempt to reassert authority. He leaned forward, sweat glistening, his voice straining as he warned viewers not to be fooled by her polished lies. But by then, the damage was done. Crockett had not only exposed the flaws in his arguments, she had exposed the weakness in his style. His fury, once his strength, now looked like panic. His gestures, once commanding, now looked erratic. Crockett ended with nothing more than a calm reminder to the audience. Truth can withstand scrutiny. Lies cannot. She didn't have to declare victory. The audience had already decided. The feed cut to commercial with Jones still fuming, slamming his fist on the desk as if volume alone could undo the impression he had left. But it was too late. The image of him unraveling beside her quiet composure was already spreading across the internet, replayed and dissected in real time. For Alex Jones. The night had started like any other, him in control, ready to dominate the conversation with fire and thunder. But by the end, he had lost what mattered most. The image of unshakable authority. Crockett's steady confidence had left him exposed, and the world had seen it live. Would you like me to now create the ending statements in 500 words with the same storytelling style, tying everything together? When the lights dimmed and the broadcast wrapped, the aftershocks of what had unfolded were already reverberating far beyond the studio. Alex Jones had entered the conversation with the same force that had carried him for youth, commanding, loud, and unyielding. But Jasmine Crockett had walked in with something far more powerful. The discipline to remain calm in the face of chaos. Their exchange wasn't just another clash on live television. It was a revealing moment that pulled back the curtain on the way bluster crumbles when confronted with patience and proof. The ending image lingered in the minds of viewers. Jones, his voice cracking, pounding on his desk, sweating under the heat of the studio lights, still insisting he was the target of unseen enemies. Beside him, Crockett, unbothered, leaning back with an air of quiet confidence, as though she had nothing left to prove. The contrast told the story better than words. One figure fought to keep control of a narrative he could no longer hold, while the other simply allowed the facts to speak for themselves. Social media caught fire almost instantly. Clips spread across platforms, not just highlighting Crockett's words, but showing Jones unraveling. Memes, threads, and commentary flooded timelines, and what had once been his weapon, the spectacle of his rage, was now being dissected as a weakness. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't the one defining the conversation. The public was, and the public was laughing, questioning, and sharing. For Jones. The broadcast was a reminder of the risk that comes with live confrontation. His style depended on overwhelming others, on controlling the tempo so thoroughly that no one could land a clean shot against him. But Crockett never played into that rhythm. She allowed him to shout himself into a corner, and then calmly presented facts that left him with nowhere to go. His refusal to answer directly, his frantic pivots, and his fury, all worked against him. The very performance that had once made him untouchable now left him exposed. For Crockett. The moment became a testament to the power of composure. She didn't need to match his aggression. She didn't need to belittle him or shout him down. By sticking to the truth and keeping her tone steady, she allowed the imbalance to reveal itself. What she showed viewers was that strength doesn't always come from being the loudest in the room, it comes from refusing to be moved. When the noise rises around you, when the credits rolled and the cameras cut, one thing was certain. The exchange would live far beyond the air. It was more than a clash of two personalities. It was a demonstration of how fragile spectacle becomes when confronted with steady truth. Alex Jones had gone into the broadcast expecting another win, another performance to keep his legend alive. Instead, he left with his image cracked, his bluster undercut, and his authority shaken. And all it took was one calm voice refusing to back down. Would you like me to polish all the keynotes plus ending statements into a single flowing long-form story, like one complete article so it reads seamlessly?